The unique thing about my SaaS experience with, or my experience with both these companies is that it's been in different stages. So again, I'm not sure how many of you know the general cycle that SaaS companies go through, the 3-3-2-2-2 model of growth, where you triple your revenues in 1 year, again you triple your revenues, and then double your revenues, double your revenues, double your revenues in subsequent years, till you get to that magical figure of 100 million. So BrowserStack, of course, is one of, I think, not one of, but probably the second most successful SaaS startup in India after Freshdesk. And my experience at BrowserStack was when the company tripled its revenues, doubled its revenues, and was again going to double its revenues, which is just an insane growth story. So Webengage has been around for a while, but my experience with them, I joined them a couple of years ago, and the company underwent a major product pivot about 2.5 years ago. So I'll be speaking a little bit about both Webengage and my practical experiences at BrowserStack. But leaving that aside, the experience at Webengage is slightly on the early stage of the growth cycle, where the company has tripled its revenues and it's on its way to doubling the revenues. I also post very detailed blog posts on my blog, which is on Medium. So if you want to check it out, you can head over to this blog. All right, so I will be speaking about customer development today. These are my learnings, my definition of customer development. So I'll be covering what customer development is about, why is it exactly that you need it, where can it be used, and how do you exactly go about doing customer development. So this is a lot to cover in half an hour, but I'll try to cover as much as I can. And again, I'm not sure how applicable it is to B2C scenarios. Mostly, it's based on my experience with SaaS companies. So let's move on to what customer development actually is, or at least my definition of customer development. So I'll first cover what customer development is not, and then I'll talk about what customer development is to me. So customer development, and please bear with me for the next 5 minutes or so, because there will be a bit of theory and gyan that I have to share with you before I move on to practical examples of some of the things that I've done, where we've used customer development both in BrowserStack and Webengage. So customer development is certainly not asking your users what they want and then going about and building it. It's also certainly not running surveys, asking your users a bunch of questions and then running whatever analysis you want on those survey questions or those survey answers to make your decisions. It's none of these two things. What customer development is actually about is you have some hypothesis about some industry, about some business problem, and you speak with your customers to validate the hypothesis so that you end up building something which has a real chance of success. So customer development at the end of the day is only about figuring out the right problem to solve. That's, if there's one thing that you should take away from this talk in terms of what customer development is about, it's simply that it's about finding the right problem to solve. Because if, there's an old adage in the Silicon Valley that ideas don't matter and execution is what matters, execution is what makes the difference, and I think that's fundamentally flawed. Because execution at the end of the day has to be completely flawless. But if your idea is not that great, or if you're not solving a genuine problem, then there's no way that you can actually go about building a product which has any chance of success. Case in point being BrowserStack. So the company has grown within a matter of 5 years. Company was bootstrapped till they raised $50 million from Axel, I think a month ago or so. So the company went from 0 to about $40 to $50 million in revenues within a matter of 5 years, which is just insane growth even by Silicon Valley standards. Such kind of growth, I mean, you generally don't see even with some of the popular SaaS startups that you might have heard of that are based in the US. So when the founders started off BrowserStack, they probably did not realize that before writing any single line of code, these guys were speaking to a lot of customers. For the first month or so, they just spent time speaking to the customers to figure out whether the problem that they were trying to solve was even a genuine problem that people face, or was it a problem that they only had and was there no market for it. So they did not realize that this whole speaking with the customers, understanding and empathizing with what the customers are what people are generally going through. They did not realize that they were doing customer development, but this was what customer development is about. So if you're solving the right problem, as was the case with BrowserStack, if you do that, then you'll end up building something like a BrowserStack, which I think has been phenomenally successful by any standards. The other thing with customer development, and this is especially in SaaS, is that you're not always the user of your product, which is why it then becomes very important to speak with your customers, to be able to empathize with them, and to be able to understand the problems that they face. Because if you're not able to do that, then there's no way that you'll be able to build a solution that actually solves the problem that these guys are facing. So case in point, the work that I do at Webengage. Webengage has built a software product that B2C companies use to increase their revenues through by engaging. So B2C companies can use Webengage to engage with their customers on different channels like email and push notification and app messages and so on and so forth. I have no experience in B2C. I've never done B2C marketing. Unless and until I do customer development, unless and until I'm able to empathize with the customers, there's no way that I would be able to, build a product which is for B2C companies. Anyway, moving on. Just a couple of more slides before I move to the practical experiences, my practical experiences with customer development. So customer development, as the topic suggests, it's needed because you need to build something that has a real chance of success. And once you've reached that product market fit, you would want to grow your revenues through new customers and existing customers. Anyway, let's just quickly move on to the next slide. So quant analysis can only get you so far. Product managers, or I think even marketing folks, everyone loves doing quant analysis. But does quant analysis actually, give you answers to the problems that you're facing? Perhaps not. So if you look at this random funnel that I've drawn over here, quant analysis will probably tell you that there's a problem in the funnel, or the bottleneck in the funnel is between steps 2 and 3. But will quant analysis tell you why the problem is there? Probably not, unless you're speaking with the customers to figure out why the problem is there. Unless you're doing that customer development, whatever solutions, you'll probably just be shooting in the dark if you just go by a quant analysis and start developing experiments and ideas to solve this problem in the funnel. So you can, of course, use customer development in the pre-product market fit stage and also in the post-product market fit. So let me just spend a minute describing this funnel because I'll be covering how we had solved this problem of conversion at BrowserStack. So I think it's important for you guys to know my definition of what this funnel looks like for SaaS companies. So at the top of the SaaS funnel, you have acquisition. So my definition of acquisition is making people aware of your website or your app. So getting them to visit the app, getting them to visit the website, or getting them to download the app, not necessarily signing up. Conversion then becomes a visitor to a free sign up, and also free sign up to a paid subscription. So you can grow either by acquiring, getting more users to come to your website or your app and then converting them, or the other way to grow is through retention and expansion. So once you've got a bunch of customers, then you reduce the churn, and then you grow through land and expand, upsell, cross-sell, and all of those things. So customer development can be used across this life cycle of your business, of your product, or what you want to call it. Moving on to the more meaty part, which are my experiences with customer development. The first example that I'll cover is this funnel that I was talking about. I'll talk about one of the problems that we faced at BrowserStack and how we went about solving this problem. So I've been speaking a lot about BrowserStack, but I've assumed that a lot of you know what BrowserStack does, but I think I should probably tell you what BrowserStack does before I jump into this problem. So for those of you who have not heard of BrowserStack, it helps you test your website on any desktop browser or any mobile device within a matter of seconds. So it's a great product. It's done really great. So the problem that we were trying to solve at BrowserStack was this problem of increasing our conversion. So this conversion funnel that I had described to you, where you've got people visiting your website and you want them to convert into paying subscribers. Our churn was something that we really couldn't control, but the growth was phenomenal. We used to get like 1,600 signups a day, which is just insane with like zero marketing, pure word of mouth, 1,600 signups a day. You should be converting, or we should have been converting a lot of them than the numbers were before we started with this exercise. So if you look at the funnel that I've drawn here for the funnel that I guess is applicable to any SaaS startup or any SaaS product in general. So at the top of the funnel, the step one, you have people visiting your website. Step two, you would have some of these visitors signing up. Then in case of BrowserStack, the step three would be you sign up, you go in the app, and then you test on one or two browsers. Step four is real usage, which is using a lot more features, seriously evaluating BrowserStack and whether it can meet your needs. Step five is visiting the pricing page, and step six is going to the checkout page and converting. So no funnel is as linear as I've made it out to be here, but in general, just for simplicity's sake, I guess we can, this is the funnel that, some sort of a simple funnel that we had created. So quantitative data helped us figure out where the problem was, which was between steps 3 and 4 and between steps 5 and 6. But quantitative data was not able to tell us why the problem was there. So people were testing on one or two browsers, but they weren't really using the platform, so they weren't progressing from step 3 to step 4. There was a lot of dropout at the pricing page as well. So we knew that the problem existed, but to solve the problem, we could have developed 100 experiments, 200 experiments, which is what, again, the general adage goes that if you're doing growth, just run a bunch of experiments and something hopefully will click. But that's not how we wanted to do things at BrowserStack, because we wanted to invest our time in things which had a real chance of success rather than just shooting in the dark. So we decided to do custom development. So there were a few things that we did in terms of, so we wanted to solve this problem of understanding why people weren't converting. So what we decided to do was to segment our customers, speak with them, summarize all the findings that we had, and then create some patterns out of these findings in order to devise a plan of action. So I will cover each of, maybe not each of these points, but okay, let me just proceed with what I have. So the first thing that we did was to segment our customers. Now, when it comes to segmenting your customers, you can segment them on a bunch of different parameters. You could segment them based on the regions that they're from, the size of the company, the title, the industry, and a bunch of other factors which are applicable to your business. We realized that when we started with this whole segmentation exercise, the title and industry weren't that applicable to us for some reason. So BrowserStack is a horizontal SaaS solution. It's not a vertical SaaS solution. So for simplicity's sake, we did not discriminate between the QA folks who wanted to test on BrowserStack and the front-end developers who wanted to test on BrowserStack. So the title, we weren't that bothered about the title. We weren't bothered about the industry. We were looking mostly for the size of the company and regions. The size of the company, again, this is something which is very specific to BrowserStack. We realized that most of our customers were in one of these categories. They were either freelancers, which is a one or two man shop. They were an agency, or they were a startup. So our definition of a startup was a company which had anywhere between 1 to maybe 2 to 50 people. SME was anywhere between 51 to 500 people, and enterprise was greater than 500 people. And the regions that we wanted to focus on were something we called Region 1, Region 2, and Region 3. So Region 1 for us was, or for any SaaS company, I think, would be customers from the US and Western Europe, because the conversions that you experience with these customers is just so much better than conversions from folks from the other countries. So Region 1 was Western Europe and the US. Region 2 for us was maybe some of the other European countries and Australia, Japan. And Region 3 were all the developing countries, such as China, India. Well, debatable whether these are developing countries, but India, China, and Vietnam, and all of these countries where the conversion was really poor. So as far as this problem was concerned, we were focused on increasing conversion, but limited to increasing conversion for Region 1 and 2. So this is the first step that we followed with this whole customer development process, where we identified who is it that we wanted to go after, or who is it that we wanted to get in touch with. There were a few questions that we asked these guys, which you can read it much faster than I can say it aloud. But the questions were very open-ended in nature, because we were just trying to understand why is it that people weren't purchasing a subscription, what are the alternatives that they had to BrowserStack. So if they weren't using BrowserStack, they must be using something else. So what that something else was Why did they even register on BrowserStack? How did they even hear about BrowserStack? And all of those things. The idea was really simple. The idea was just to get a sense of what is it that customers come to BrowserStack for, and what is it that was preventing them from proceeding beyond those funnel stages that I talked to you about. So we got in touch with only those customers who were stuck at these stages. This is a slide, you cannot read anything which is there on this slide, but the idea really is, so we got in touch with the customers, we had detailed calls with the customers, and I'll be covering this exact process of the kind of questions that you should ask your customers when you're doing customer development and how this whole process happens in the next 5 minutes or so. But the whole idea really was that for each call that we did about 40 to 50 customer calls. We created detailed Excel sheets, which was basically like a summary of all the calls that we've had. Once we'd done that, we then created a sheet like this, where rows represent each of the customers that we spoke to, and the columns represent different parameters on which we wanted to figure out what our customers were really up to. So whether it was their testing, something we call the testing maturity, something we call the testing frequency, the size of their team, the kind of the browsers that they tested on, and a bunch of other different parameters. Not a bunch of other different parameters, but maybe 5 or 6 different parameters. The idea at the end of the day was really simple. It was to move from this voluminous data. It was basically to figure out some patterns on how these different personas behaved when it came to testing on BrowserStack, and what were the problems that they faced what are the problems that each of these different personas faced when they were testing on BrowserStack. So this then got distilled into another sheet, which was this. Again, you cannot read anything on this, but what I'm trying to communicate basically is that there were 4 or 5 different personas that we had, and each of these personas had their own set of problems. So persona 1 did not want to test on mobile emulators. That's something that they were able to do on their own. So they wanted to test on real mobile devices. Persona 2 needed to test only occasionally, so they would create multiple free accounts, because BrowserStack had this free trial phase where you could register on the website, and in 30 minutes you could test on whatever browser you wanted to. So given that you test on, you do cross-browser testing maybe twice, thrice a month, you are more than happy to just create multiple free accounts and test. There was no need for you to purchase a subscription. Persona 3 was a number of enterprises who said that our pricing was too complicated. Persona 4, these are mostly freelancers. Freelancers, of course, would always complain that the pricing is too expensive and pricing doesn't suit my needs. But this is also a feedback that came from a lot of our customers, that the pricing did not suit the requirements that they had. They wanted to test for 50 or 100 minutes a month, so why is it the BrowserStack was charging them those insane amounts that we used to? Something that everyone said was that the texting experience was just too slow. So it's basically, at the end of the day, you're opening on your browser, you're opening a virtual machine which is opening another browser. So obviously the experience would have been slow. So anyway, so that was again a feedback that the customers told us. So there were a bunch of these problems that we had figured out that our customers had. Then it was time to figure out how is it that you go about increasing the conversion. So how do you go about solving which problem, and in what order should you tackle each of these problems? So then it becomes, in terms of, just to complete this, the process of how we went about increasing conversion, I'll just cover this slide very briefly. But at the end of the day, the way we went about solving the problems, or the way we went about deciding which ideas to work on, was following that traditional impact effort matrix, where you work on the high impact, low effort items first, and then you work on all the other items. So there were a few things that we did. We limited the free trial to but we limited the trial to a few browsers so that you get a taste of what BrowserStack was about, but you would not have been able to actually do what you came to do in that free trial that you had at BrowserStack, which worked phenomenally for us. It increased the conversion almost by 30%. So when you're getting 1,600 signups a day, when your conversion goes from 10%, jumps up by almost 30%, just by doing this little change over a couple of days, it just adds a lot of money to the top line. For folks who were complaining about the fact that BrowserStack was too slow, they were required, we had made available only mobile emulators and not real mobile devices. We decided to provide real mobile devices on the platform and make the testing experience super fast. So This change was going to take anywhere from 6 months to a year. So again, this is what I was talking about, that you prioritize the order in which you want to go. So you get those quick, easy events first, which is why we decided to do the first thing, and the third thing that I'm going to cover now, which is the pricing revamp. And then while also working on this long-term goal, which would, which was going to increase the conversion by a significant degree. So we worked on this long-term thing. The pricing was completely revamped to make it, slightly persona-based. We were still not able to achieve. Even if you go to the pricing page now, it's not exactly persona-based, but there are plans now available for your requirements if you're, let's say an enterprise or if you're a freelancer. Because again, it's a horizontal solution. So if you can sell to everyone, actually, why not sell to everyone? It's a typical life cycle that any SaaS company goes through, which I guess Ashish was covering in his session on what he's done with PostSys, that you start with the smaller guys first and then you move upstream, which is what BrowserStack is trying to do now. That there's a lot of focus on enterprises and the likes. The problem that we weren't able to solve was this problem of occasional testing. So one of the reasons why people did not purchase a subscription was that they didn't need to, they didn't need to use the product all that often. They would use BrowserStack for maybe a couple of hours, 3 hours a month, and that was about it. So, if my behavior is going to be, if my usage of the product is going to be occasional, then why do I even make that investment into purchasing this product when, again, I'm not going to use it all that much? Given the nature of the product itself, it's a very, very difficult problem to solve at BrowserStack. So we weren't able to solve this problem, and the only way that you can solve this problem is either you build a bunch of complementing solutions. So again, this is something that companies like Atlassian has done. You have your Jira, and then you build, in order to expand, you build a bunch of different software products to increase money from the current guys that are already on board, and for the new people who want to sign up, there are other offerings that you can give to them in order to get them to try out the different products that you have, which is what BrowserStack is trying to do now with a bunch of different products that they've launched in the last year or so. So this was my experience with doing customer development at BrowserStack. I'll very quickly cover one of the features that we have at Webengage, a basic USP at Webengage, which has given us tremendous growth over the last couple of years, and how this came into being. So the journey of Webengage, so Webengage has been around for a while. Started off, I think, sometime in 2011. And for many years, I think the year shouldn't be 2016, it should be 2015. For the first four and a half years, Webengage was this cute little on-site software which helped you engage with your customers through on-site notification, on-site surveys, and on-site feedback. It worked pretty well for them. They were able to scale the revenues then very quickly within a couple of years to whatever the number was in the single-digit early millions. But there came a point in time when the founders realized, and I wasn't in BrowserStack at that point in time, there came a time when the founders realized that the growth was steady, but it wasn't exponential. So there was a session that was talking, I think Jonathan talked about the Panga growth and the Dhanda growth. We wanted the Panga growth, which is exponential growth, but there was basically a steady growth curve that we were experiencing, which as a SaaS startup which sells to the world, you shouldn't be too happy about. Which is when the founders decided to pivot into this full suite retention marketing software for B2C companies. So you could do analytics, you could segment your customers, and then you could engage with them through all these different channels, such as push notification, emails, in-app notifications, and the likes. So the objective, like I mentioned, was to move from a steady growth curve to an exponential growth curve. And a couple of years ago, or 3 years ago, if you look at the B2C retention marketing space, in the enterprise sector or in the enterprise space, you have the Adobes of the world, Oracles, SAPs, Salesforce, through ExactTarget, and a bunch of other companies which occupy that space of being B2C marketing clouds for enterprises. But if you look at the space from startups to all the way to mid-sized companies, there is there is no one company that's actually known for being, or there are no few companies that are known for being the softwares for B2C marketing. And Webengage wanted to occupy that particular category. But what actually happened was that there was some growth. It wasn't the exponential curve, exponential growth that we wanted. And in the last 2-3 years, there have been, there's a lot of competition that has come in from some of the Indian companies, as well as a lot of the US software startups, US startups which have raised shitloads of money. So it wasn't, the plan wasn't working out as good as we had sort of wanted to. So we wanted to figure out we wanted to speak to our customers to figure out what is it that, what is the problem, what is the right problem we should be solving in order to get on that exponential growth curve. Again, it's not asking customers for kya karna chahiye, what features should we develop, and that sort of stuff, but it was just about identifying the right problem to solve. So there was a lot of open-ended discussions that happened with a bunch of our customers that were sort of already using BrowserStack, and also with a bunch of customers who had no idea, Webengage, and a bunch of customers who had no idea what Webengage did. So there were a lot of feature requests apparently that came in with, add more channels of integration like you do emails, push notifications and app messages and the likes, add Facebook, Google, do this and do that. But when we spoke to them about the use cases that we had, none of these guys, about the top problems that they were facing, or some of the top use cases that they had in mind when it comes to engaging with the customers that they've already acquired, nobody mentioned that my biggest problem is that I'm not able to engage with my customers on Facebook or on Google or any of these channels. The use cases that they were talking about were fairly complicated in nature. So they weren't telling us they were telling us that integrate with this, integrate with that, maybe build this feature, build that feature, but nobody was telling us to build a feature for this complicated use case complicated use cases or this complicated problems that they were facing, which, so this complicated use case that I'm talking about is simply that if you look at B2C marketing, generally a lot of companies, maybe not just in India, all across the world, they end up spamming their customers, which is really not the right way of doing marketing. You don't want to be sending your customers a bunch of notifications and a bunch of SMSs, hoping some of them would convert, because that's just pure spam. So the use cases that you would have in mind are fairly complicated. If the customer does this, then wait for something. If the customer adds something to cart, then wait for 7 days for the user to purchase. And if the customer doesn't purchase, then check if the customer is reachable on email. If the customer is reachable, then send him an email. Once he clicks the email, get him to the app, and then show an app notification. So very complicated use cases. Nobody was telling us this, but this is what we gleaned. So in case of BrowserStack, it was very direct pain points that customers told us that they had with BrowserStack. It was a bit different with Webengage, where we had to sort of read between the lines to figure out what to do next. Which then resulted in this software that we had, and I'm not trying to sell it, but this is the Journey Designer is what helps you do those complicated use cases that I was talking about. This has been our single biggest USP. This is what has resulted in the tremendous growth that we've had over the last couple of years. And if we didn't speak with our customers, if we didn't do that customer development that I was talking about, there's no way that we would have come up with this visual way of doing marketing, where you are, whatever the flowchart that I was talking to you about, whatever the use case I was talking to you about, you could just drag and drop elements and create whatever different complex marketing flow that you have in mind. So yeah, so that was the story with Webengage. I am not going to cover how we reduce churn at BrowserStack, but I will cover, how much time? Okay, I'll just take 5 more minutes. So I definitely want to cover this, because if there's one thing that you should take away from my presentation, it's the lessons that I'm going to share here. So I'll just do it quickly in like 2-3 minutes or so. So how exactly do you go about doing customer development? So exactly the way we did it at BrowserStack or at Webengage, where you start with some hypothesis that you're trying to validate. Could be a business process, could be some industry problem. But there must be it'll be good to have some hypothesis that you have about this industry, about some problem that you should validate with the customers to figure out the right, whether this is even the right problem to solve. You identify your users, you create a list of users to speak with, you get in touch with them, you create those detailed call logs. From those detailed call logs, you create that summary that I was talking about, and from that summary, you create some patterns, and from that pattern, you then devise your plan of action moving forward. Some of the questions that you can ask. So you guys, I mean, everyone should really pay attention to this because it's all about figuring out the right problem to solve. So when you get on a call with a customer, so obviously you ask them about what they do and the pain points that they have and all of that. And then you ask them the single biggest problem that they face, or a bunch of problems that they face, and which are the top problems among those problems. So the customer will tell you that X, Y, and Z are the problems that they face. And X happens to be their biggest problem. So the customer is telling you that X is their biggest problem, but is it actually genuinely their biggest problem, which is why you should ask them a bunch of follow-up questions. When was the last time that they faced the problem, and how often do they face it? Because if they're telling you that this is their biggest problem, then they should be facing it on a regular basis, and they should be able to tell you that I'd faced this problem a day ago, couple of days ago. They shouldn't be thinking about when was the last time that they faced a problem, which if they are thinking, then it means that they don't really have this problem. So if you figure out that they face the problem fairly continuously, and it is obviously a big challenge for them, you should ask them the impact that this problem has on their business. How much time and money does it cost them? Because if they're telling you that it is a genuine problem that they face it all the time, it should be costing the company, it should some time and money. It should have some sort of an impact on the company. If it doesn't, then in most cases it's a wrong problem to solve. And if they've told you if they've told you that it has a major impact on the business, they face it all the time and all of that, then you should ask them how are they going about solving this problem. Because if they have this problem, they must have if this is such a big problem for them, they must have some solution in place. The solution might be very manual in nature, very rudimentary, but there must be some solution that they've created to solve this problem. If they don't have a solution, then it means that the problem is not actually a genuine problem. So no one's lying to you, but what they are actually saying doesn't exactly, it probably is not, the problem is not that big, it's not of that major importance to the customers, even though they might be telling you that it is. So that's why you ask a bunch of these questions to figure out that, to say that you're, to reach a conclusion that you're solving the genuine problem. And this is my last slide. There's just some do's and don'ts about how you should go about doing customer development. I guess some of the morning sessions I've covered it, but don't bias your customers with questions like, do you think we should do A or B or C, or do you think this is good or that is good? It should always be open-ended questions, because there are some assumptions that you have about the industry or about the business problem. So you should be asking your customers open-ended questions so that you can get a very non-biased, neutral perspective on what the problem is actually about. Please don't do surveys. If you just need like a yes or no validation, surveys are pretty awesome, but I personally don't really believe in surveys. I also would, so I've done mostly customer development over the phone as opposed to doing it in person, because it's easy to type on the phone, on your laptop on the phone, as opposed to being in front of a person and using a laptop to type, because that's just very, it just seems very weird. You're talking to someone and the other person is typing on the laptop. And after doing maybe 10, 15, 20 calls, you'll start to realize that you're hearing the same things again and again. There's a pattern to, you start seeing some sort of a pattern, you start hearing the same things again and again, which means that that's the time that perhaps you can stop doing custom development. So the moment you stop hearing new things, that's the moment you can safely stop doing your customer development. So once you've done these calls, you've created the summary sheet that I was talking about, you create those findings, create patterns, and then put that into a plan of action. And there's for the SaaS companies here, you should definitely get a customer advisory board in place. A lot of Silicon Valley companies have also done this. We have not yet done this at Webengage. But we also want to put some sort of a customer advisory board in place where you work with your top maybe 5 to 10 customers and really get them to be invested in your success as you are in their success. It's always a great thing to have some sort of a customer advisory board in place where whatever ideas and whatever problems that you want to discuss, you can always run it by them. Customers love it, and I think it's a great way to get very deep insights into from people who are invested in your success as you are in theirs. So yeah, I think that's my time, and those are all the questions I had.